welcome back to another episode of the Liberator Podcast. I'm here with James Silverman and Russell Hunter. My name is Sam Riley. This week we're going to be talking about the importance of language, why we use abolitionist and not pro-life. A lot of people insist on using a bunch of different labels and sometimes just mixing in with the mainstream, and we're going to be talking about the importance of why it is important to actually differentiate ourselves using the language of abolitionism. But I think the first thing we need to do is probably define it. So we always go to Russell for that.
So, yeah, I think anytime you're dealing with words or terms, you start out, what does the actual word mean? I think some folks, whenever they look at it, we're using it, sadly, they might go, what's an abolitionist? Or, you're just like, because for some people, it probably is kind of an archaic word.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are mispronouncing it at conferences. They're like, man, I'm so glad you enlightened me on the abolishment of abortion. And you're just like, yeah, the abolition of abortion. But yeah, so I think some people look at it and then the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go like dictionary.com or, they're just going to type it into Google. And you just type it straight into Google. You get, the Merriam-Webster definition, abolish, to end the observance or effect of something such as a law, to completely do away with something, annul, and then abolish a law, abolish slavery. Perfectly good definition of the word and a good place to begin. Of course, it goes beyond that, but I think that we want to begin this is like whenever we're talking about why we use the word abolitionist instead of the word like pro-life, probably the most significant important thing is like, well, let's look at the word. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the word, you're like, wow, that is a really clear, strong, elegant word. Like when we're talking about abortion, what do we want to do? We want to abolish it, like end its observance, the laws protecting it, its effects, its occurrence, all that kind of stuff. You're trying to annul it. Mm-hmm. And so, why would we go about using that word instead of a word like pro-life? This is super significant. So just to start off with, whenever I say I am an abolitionist, I mean that I am in regard to whatever specific thing we're talking about, and the context is abortion. I am for its abolition. Mm-hmm. I'm not just for its regulation. I'm not just for it coming to an end. I'm not just, that's a bad thing, I don't like it. I'm not just, that's a personal thing. Like I'm literally saying, my moral position is that abortion is murder. It's reprehensible. It's a crime. It should be utterly abolished. Right. Now, because it's legal and because there are laws protecting its practice, abolish ends up being the technical legal term, but I can use that as the term describing what I actually believe.
Right.
And it gets to be consistent all the way through.
So what comes up a lot at this point is people will say, well, you're just, you're trying to ride the coattails of the abolitionists because people like them. Or they'll say, well, that was the term they used, come up with your own term or, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So why do you think we're justified in calling ourselves abolitionists and attaching ourselves to that movement?
Well, I mean, just to begin with, I mean, you can attach yourself to the movement or not. The original movement used the word because it was the correct word for them.
Yeah.
Say there never, ever was an abolitionist of slavery movement. We still would be abolitionist of abortion. It still would be more correct and accurate and powerful to say you're an abolitionist of abortion, even if there never was an abolitionist movement against slavery or the slave trade. So sometimes you'll see people, it's a really minority position, but it may be a loud position that'll say something like, I'm not calling myself an abolitionist because I don't want to be connected to the abolitionists of slavery.
Yeah.
And so that's like sort of like a kind of a pernicious, like modern day racist sort of view or whatever. They don't like the abolitionists because they think the people that weren't trying to end slavery were bad. But there's like a more innocent one, like someone might not want to call themselves an abolitionist because they fear that people are going to confuse them into thinking that they're fighting slavery. It's like you say, I'm here to speak on the abolition of abortion. I'm an abolitionist. And then, someone says, isn't that about slavery? Like as if it's the only way that you can use the term.
Right. And the important thing to touch on here is that the abolitionists of slavery did not intend for this concept to apply exclusively to slavery, right?
Yeah.
We talked about the poster up behind Sam last week.
Yeah.
After Wilberforce, after he succeeded, he said, "Well, Henry, what shall we abolish next?" Right?
Yeah.
And you had William Lloyd Garrison writing things like, "My fanaticism is to make Christianity the enemy of all that is sinful,
Yeah.
not just make it the enemy of slavery, but I want Christianity to be being brought into conflict with sin wherever it appears."
Yeah.
Not
They would
just
actually
slavery.
go way out of their way to say, like, I am an abolitionist. Not so much I am an abolitionist of slavery. So it's like, I'm an abolitionist. Anywhere there's anything being practiced in our culture that's contrary to the law of God or the love of Christ, I am for its total and immediate abolition.
Yeah.
Another one that Garrison said is like, anything that the gospel was designed to destroy ought to be immediately annulled, abolished. And so it's this sort of spiritual, psychological disposition of the person to be an abolitionist. But I know y'all brought up the posters in the last episode, but one of the things early on, because I was back in 2010, very much, I'm going to call myself an abolitionist because I don't want to be misconstrued as being like these pro-life regulationists and all. I had my reasons, but there is a historical connection. I was reading historical stuff, and one of the sort of early books that I read, it wasn't an American. I actually have it right here. But one of the sort of first go-to text, this is Thomas Clarkson, The Abolition of the African Slave Trade by the British Parliament, Volume 1. It's a 2-volume thing. It's the first sort of scholarly, historical sort of outline of what the abolition of the slave trade did. And Thomas Clarkson, you know in the movie Amazing Grace, you know the guy with the long hair?
Yeah.
That is off in the field with a baby at some point.
The guy pouring whiskey on his friend's grave.
Yeah. They do it really in that movie. They try to lift up Wilberforce so much and put everyone else down. But Thomas Clarkson's probably the most significant historical guy. If you're ever interested in that sort of stuff, you couldn't have done it without a Wilberforce in the Parliament. But Thomas Clarkson was sort of the ideologue behind a lot of what they did. And after it was all said and done, slave trade had been abolished. He's sitting down to write this sort of mammoth 2-volume history. And I thought, okay, what did these people do? What worked? What didn't work? Why did they do it? I just want to get back into their head and just, learn from them. And right there at the beginning of the book I'm reading, and by page 28, this is the final sentiment at the opening chapter. He straight up says that the reason I'm writing this book is that there are many evils still left among us that may, by a union of wise and virtuous individuals, be greatly alleviated, if not entirely done away. For if the great evil of the slave trade, so deeply entrenched by its hundred interests, has fallen prostrate before the efforts of those who attacked it, what evil of a less magnitude or greater magnitude shall not be more easily subdued? So he's straight up, I'm going to write the history of the abolition of the slave trade because I know there's still things to abolish.
Right. And future generations need to know this, the ways we went about it, the arguments we made, the strategies were pursued, all of those things. Yeah.
I mean, just a little poetical refrain. He says, the contemplation of the removal of this monstrous evil, the slave trade, should excite in us a most pleasing and grateful sensation. For the perusal of history, it should afford us lessons. Who are the lessons for? Future abolitionists. And so when I read that, I was kind of I'm a future abolitionist. And, I was excited that not only would I be able to, call myself an abolitionist and attach myself to various people in history, I'd be using the right word, but that they themselves understood it in this way. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the definitions in the dictionaries will actually say, for example, the abolition of slavery. Right. And people get stuck on that.
That's why it's most attached to.
And it is most attached. But pretty much anyone who sort of sets out to do a serious movement to remove something that is legally protected kind of calls themselves an abolitionist. We're not the only people using this term today.
And I think that, a lot of people can get tripped up for a couple different reasons, both it being an archaic word and stuff like that. But I think the important thing for today is why we need to distinguish ourselves from the pro-life movement. There's I think there's a lot, even people in the pro-life movement don't want us using this language. They know how important it is. And they'll continue to call us pro-lifers because they know that it's important that we're separating ourselves off. They don't want people looking to a separate solution to this problem. They want to be seen as the sole solution, the people that you look to. So I think we need to get into a little bit about why different from pro-lifers.
Right. So let's take a look at Senate District 7, for instance. Right. So we've got a guy running saying, I'm running to abolish abortion in the state of Oklahoma. And then you've got a pro-life candidate who's out there saying, I'm the most pro-life, I'm 100% pro-life with Oklahomans for Life and Oklahomans for Life, and I think National Right to Life as well. We're saying, we endorse this guy. Yeah. And so from all appearances, this is a super anti-abortion guy, and if you don't understand the distinctions there, you're not going to understand why it's so important to vote for the abolitionist rather than the pro-lifer who's running to regulate abortion. Yeah. And so getting people to understand, here's what an abolitionist candidate looks like, and here's what a pro-life candidate or pro-life senator looks like. Yep. Here's what an abolition bill looks like. Here's the components of one. Here's what they do. Here's what a pro-life bill does, and here's what to look for in a pro-life bill. Yeah. Here are abolitionist ideas, and all of that. You've got to set up that distinction so that people know to go this way, to pull this lever instead of this one. And language is important in helping people to understand that.
And it's in bills, it's in candidates. That's where it's the easiest. But there's also what do abolitionists do at the child sacrifice centers differently than what abortion, pro-lifers do at the abortion clinics. And so the demarcation, the sort of distinguishing characteristics and ideological stuff is there across the board. And, it's funny because like you said that pro-lifers don't want us to make this division because they don't want there to be a different movement. Just the candidate, in the primary, the pro-life Republicans don't want there to be sort of like a choice between an abolitionist and a pro-lifer. Yeah. They want it to be there's just pro-lifers and there's just pro-choice. This is the binary. This is the dialectic. There is no other. They don't want these sort of lines being drawn. So it's super important that we draw these lines because if we can draw the line in a way that's true and meaningful, we can get people to cross the line. And instead of doing the same sort of insane over and over and over and over and over pro-life thing that never goes anywhere, you start getting people to do abolition. So
and it
super
makes
important.
It easier for them to distract with a whole bunch of other things. Because if you're just a candidate who's running and saying, I'm really pro-life, and the other guy is not really pro-life, and then they just go, well, this guy is bad in all these different ways, then to the voter, it's like, oh, I think that this guy's probably bad in all these other ways. And he's just saying he's really pro-life, and that's really the only difference, which is like not a good way of framing the whole thing.
Yeah, we're both pro-life. I'm just really pro-life. Yeah. I mean, it's better to be like, if you have a candidate who's like, listen, vote for me because I'm not pro-life, and then all the people who want to abolish abortion don't vote for the pro-lifer because they know that pro-life means just like personally pro-life, regulate abortion, but not criminalize it. That's whenever we start really gaining ground. Yeah. And they don't want that distinction to be made, and then they don't want it to be successful. Right. They try to obscure it everywhere they can. Anywhere an abolitionist does anything good or newsworthy, like some abolitionists will end up on the Tucker Carlson show, and he'll be like wearing a shirt that says abolitionist on it, and in the interview, he'll say, I'm not a pro-lifer, I'm an abolitionist. And then the morons that run LifeSite News will literally put out a story saying pro-life teen appears on Tucker Carlson. And then I'll message them and say, what's up? Why'd you do that? And they're just like, well, we're just, it's like, no, because you're ideologically opposed to the abolition of abortion. So you don't want there to be a movement trying to abolish abortion because that would expose the fact that you're not trying to abolish it. And they work really hard. So we're seeing it more and more. Now, I do want to say, though, that it's interesting because if you talk to my kids, like I have an 8-year-old daughter, and you say, what's an abolitionist? She won't mention slavery. She knows about the abolitionist slavery, and she knows at one point in time that was something going on, but she thinks abortion. And there are lots of people, like if I'm walking around and someone says they're an abolitionist, I don't think they're talking about slavery. It has gained a lot of ground. Yeah. I don't see it a lot on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. I don't see lots of people, like whenever I say I'm an abolitionist back in early 2010, 11, 12, early days, people would always be like, what do you mean? You talking about slavery? Mm-hmm. I don't see that very often.
Yeah.
I mean, we cover it just for really new folks.
And I think part of the thing too is like the term pro-life is such a stupid term. You're just opening yourself up for so much semantic overload.
Yeah.
Like that's why they're having to fight this battle right now of, oh, what about all life? Are you pro-border life? Are you pro Black lives? Are you pro all these different things? And trying to make their movement something like a million different things, so it can't be anything at all. And you just get the semantic overload on the term, and then the pro-lifers have to spend the lion's share of their time fighting to keep their term. Yeah,
Hillary Clinton can literally say, I'm really pro-life. I'm pro the woman's life, her value, her life. Right. I'm pro the life of the community.
Yeah.
You know, all this kind of stuff.
She can't say she's really an abolitionist, though.
When it comes to abortion, I'm an abolitionist.
Yeah.
See how clearly distinct that is? Yeah. So that's still back on the term. But like the reason we want to draw that line is because we put people, you put people in the situation to out and out confess what they really believe.
Yeah.
Right, because right now we have a situation where we've got organizations called like pro-life evangelicals for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I mean, that's like a real thing.
Yeah, but you will never have evangelicals for the abolition of abortion and the support of Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
because it's contradictory. That's the strength of the term.
Yeah,
but if they can keep pro-life a relevant term, they can continue to do stuff like that, and they have been doing stuff like that for decades.
Right.
So what we have to do is we have to like distinguish the terms, create the criteria, demarcate them clearly, and then sort of stand our ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a couple of really important pragmatic points that maybe have been touched on a little bit here, but just to expand on them. One of the ways that pro-life senators and reps and governors and pro-life office holders in general, one of the games they play is they point to their pro-life bills that they pass, and they say, "Look at this bill.
Yep.
This is a huge victory," right? And so, what's key to the abolition of abortion is to be able to tell what are the things that are being done in order to pay lip service to a cause, and what are the things that are being done to actually bring about the formal end abolition, criminalization, all that stuff of abortion, to formally put an end to the thing, not to regulate it.
Yeah.
And so what's key to that is to be able to see the games that they play. The pro-life bills help them keep abortion legal. The pro-life candidates are helping to fight abortion and to fight abolitionists, and thereby keep abortion legal. And so the key is knowing what's the pro-life stuff and what's the abolition stuff, and putting your time and energy and resources behind the abolition stuff. Because until a critical mass, which for people who know history and sociology, it's not actually that big, that many people you need. You just need a very loud and passionate few.
Yeah, an irate minority willing to start brush fires in the mind. Yeah.
But until you've got that critical mass, however small it needs to be, until you have the critical mass able to say, nope, that's pro-life, that's trying to regulate abortion, you're trying to put on a pro-life badge in order to get votes, you're not actually trying to abolish it. Until people can see that as a pro-life thing and reject it and say, no, abolish abortion, establish justice, until that critical mass comes to embrace abolitionism in that sense, we're not going to have it.
Yeah. Because if you have a really loud group of people that are very not just loud and annoying, but persuasive, and you can't debate. Like we were talking to a guy tonight, it's like we need to have an abolitionist debate a pro-lifer at an upcoming conference, and you can't find a pro-lifer who will even debate that because they don't want to recognize that there's a difference.
Yeah,
because they got to get up on a stage in front of a bunch of Christians and argue for the regulation of abortion against the guy who's arguing for its abolition.
These are people who will not Facebook debate. They're not going to go up on a moderated debate.
Yeah, they don't want to recognize that there's a debate.
Yeah.
Because once they do that, then a lot of honestly good, desiring to do good things in the world people are going to go, I'm with the abolitionist.
Yeah.
So they don't want it happening. And I think that while they're working so hard to keep us from being that sort of voice, one of the things that we can kind of do to unwittingly undermine ourselves is sort of like not make a big deal of it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, one of the real motivations for us making a whole podcast on it is that you have this sort of fear where like someone goes, well, I just want to be understood and I don't really want to, like, why don't I just make the word pro-life mean abolition? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, because the words just doesn't do that.
Yeah.
It just like, you can't actually get to what you need to get to with the term.
And when you, sorry.
Well, I think there's also something too, because I think a lot of people don't want to take on the term just because of all the baggage that might come along with it. They might think, well, I've heard bad things about abolitionists and stuff like that. And I think part of
they could say that, but it might be actual tribal crap.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it as well is it's good that there's a lot of people that hate the term because it gets rid of fakers. It's like there's just a proliferation of pro-life Republicans who are completely fake, who have no interest in ending abortion at all.
Yeah.
And it's like when you have someone have to take on a term like abolitionist in order to get votes, in order to do what they're doing, they don't want that term. They hate us.
Oh, yeah. They get scared. They're like, I don't even... Because, I mean, do they want to be an anti-abolitionist to begin with?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the guy who gets up and is giving a stump speech and, they're raising funds or they're trying to get voters... And at the end of a stump speech, I'll take a few questions, and then someone raises their hand and says, "Okay, so when it comes to abortion, you said you're very pro-life, but are you an abolitionist?"
Yeah,
that guy's just sitting up there on the stage going, "How do I answer this?" Because right now,
are these lights hot?
Yeah, he's like, he's like freaking out, and then like he'll dance all around it, and he'll say really stupid pro-lifey things, and he can kind of get away with it now because most of the crowd hasn't been reached yet with the right.
I had this exact experience.
Oh yeah, you did that to Treat, right?
Greg Treat. I went to an event with Greg Treat. So back in 2019, I attended a town hall, and this is
it's a great story.
Right, this is prior to me being super visible at Free the States or anything, and so Greg Treat didn't know who I was, didn't know I was an abolitionist, and
without the beard, you look like kind of like a pro-lifer and everything. So you're like incognito, not known as a Free the States abolitionist.
Beards are abolitionist face tattoos.
Yeah, it's like the sixth tenet, unless you feel like you need to be camouflaged. But you go to the town hall and you're the last question.
Right, and I definitely couldn't get away with it now. Like Sam and I went up. Like now we can't even go in the rafters above the Senate floor without Greg Treat like seeing us and having security haul us out of there.
Those people are going to expose the fact that we're not really going to do anything about abortion. Get them out of the Capitol.
Yeah. I remember we were up there in the press box, which we were allowed to be. Joseph Silk put in a press request for us to be there. It got approved. We were allowed to be there. And I remember setting up the cameras. I had it pointed right at Greg Treat and Kim David. And I remember it was there for a few minutes. It wasn't right away.
Yeah.
We were up there for probably 8-9 minutes. But then Greg Treat looks up, makes eye contact with my camera and me. I'm like, oh, crap. We're going to be out of here in a few minutes. Because he like held it for a little bit. And then
he's sitting there thinking, what can I get away with here?
Yeah.
I'll break the law.
Right.
He's like, I can get away with breaking the law here. You're going to remove them.
And a few minutes later, the security comes up and has us hauled out of there. But anyway, this is back before I was recognizable at all as an abolitionist in Oklahoma. And so I'm there. I asked him a question. It's the last question in the town hall. I asked him, why he helped kill SB 13, what he's going to do to abolish abortion, all that sort of thing. And he responds, I got into politics because of my passion about the life issue. That's what they always call it, the life issue.
The life issue.
And I'm passionate about this, and I'm so proud of all that we've achieved. And these, he named off, there were 3 bills they passed in 2019. There was only 1 this year.
Yeah, abortion regulation stuff.
Right. They passed 3 pro-life regulations in 2019. So he lists them off. I'm so proud of our pro-life achievements. And everyone claps. Everyone claps.
Yep.
Except for me.
He's got him.
Me and Tina Brown were there, and we knew exactly what he was doing, and that's the game they play. But everyone else who didn't understand the difference between those bills and how not only the difference between those bills and abolition bills, but how those bills are used to undermine abolition bills.
Yeah. And then you get to ask your question.
And then James just goes, boo.
No, I think it's like letting the air out of a balloon or something. It's like whenever you ask your question. So what was your question? Sorry.
I just asked him about it, and he responds, I'm so proud of all that we've accomplished for the pro-life cause and all this stuff. And and he basically got away with it because they didn't allow me to give a follow-up.
Yeah, because they're like, okay, and we're wrapped up. Yeah. No, but I mean, if you can think of it, there was another thing whenever Dan Fisher was running, and there was an abolitionist supporter of Dan who went to a Kevin Stitt thing, and we had kind of got the word out about abolition quite a bit on that campaign. And Kevin Stitt finishes his thing, and the first question is somebody's like, well, yeah, but are you an abolitionist? I mean, Dan Fisher's an abolitionist. Are you an abolitionist? And Stitt had to kind of like dance around a little bit and say he had all these kids. He goes, I'm more pro-life than Dan Fisher because he had
6 kids.
I got 6 kids. And of course that abolitionist is thinking, yeah, it's just like, if the key to ending abortion was having children, okay, then the Catholics might actually do it. But or the Mormons, I guess.
Let's take this to a competition I can win.
yeah. I mean, it was just silly. But the person's just sitting there going like, so you're not an abolitionist.
Yeah.
Because if he was an abolitionist, he'd be like, yeah, I'm for the total and immediate abolition of abortion as murder, and as governor, I will criminalize it and enforce that law.
Yeah.
But at that point, when you ask that question, if it can be a demarcating line in the room to where people go, yeah, I don't really freaking care about your pro-life regulations and all that, stuff you were celebrating right there. When it came down to this young man saying, but are you an abolitionist? And you couldn't say yes, you lose my vote. And that's what they are freaked out about that.
Yeah.
And then whenever that happened with Larry Boggs and Warren Hamilton, and in that little GOP meeting where they sort of set it up and they were going to like be anti-Senate Bill 13, that's what they don't want. They don't want people showing up and being like, okay.
Yeah.
Because when it came all the way down to it, Larry Boggs had to say, no, I think abortion should be legal for certain things.
Yeah.
Boom. But you're the 100% pro-life approved, endorsed candidate.
Yeah.
So it's not that they won't use the A word. It's that they aren't what the A word stands for.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that's the power of that word.
Just to how terrible the pro-life label really is. It's like you're using a euphemism about abortion in your label for yourself. Like you're just doing the work of your enemy. Like the life issue. What a weak way to talk about genocide.
Yeah.
That's such a stupid thing. Like, do you realize how dumb that is?
Yeah.
The way that you're talking, abortion abolitionist, that sounds serious. That sounds like you're talking about an injustice.
Right.
Yep.
The life issue, that's pathetic.
It's just because they're trying to make it just a political issue among many. And so the life issue, the economy issue, the foreign policy issue,
well,
it's
if
just
you call
an
it
issue among many. They don't want to treat it like genocide, and so they don't talk about it.
Well, no
like
one's going to
genocide.
think about their failure to actually treat it adequately if they just call it the life issue. I mean, it drives me crazy because, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like whenever someone says, well, we've got to keep the president in the Oval Office because he's so pro-life. And you're like, well, there's different things that different people think about the president. But one of the things that I hate about the president is that he's pro-life. And someone says, but he's the most pro-life president. And I was like, that makes me dislike him the most.
Yeah.
He's the most pro-life president in history. So he is the least abolitionist president in history. He does the most pro-life posturing. So you can say like, we've got to have a pro-lifer in there. Well, what does it do? Nothing.
Yeah.
There's no there's no difference when there's a pro-lifer or a pro-choicer. Abortion remains unabolished.
Yeah.
Now you have someone who's in there who's an actual abolitionist. An abolitionist president may have to work like crazy to get Congress to get in line and the Supreme Court to, get off their throne. There's a lot of work that the president would have to probably do, but it's a totally different thing. You have an abolitionist versus a pro-lifer.
Yeah.
But the fact that they can like get on like a news program and just sort of like be like, I'm super pro-life because when it comes to life, I think life's precious and
right. And this is a really important point. Like just in the Mike Pence Kamala Harris debate, and this was Sam was actually, we were just talking about this in the living room the other day, and I'll just say it briefly. Maybe you can expand on it. But it's crazy how Mike Pence is asked, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, do you want abortion to be illegal in your home state of Indiana? And he dodges the question. He doesn't want to answer that question. He won't say abortion's murder, it should be abolished. But you know what he says? I am proud to be pro-life.
I am unapologetically pro-life.
Yeah, I'm pro-life and I won't apologize.
Because I can get votes and I can get fans off of this.
By paying lip service, but by not taking any sort of righteous stand against abortion
and
not
it
calling
sucks
it what it
because
is.
It works.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, well, what I was commenting on the other day was that it's such a result of the low standards of the pro-life movement, because they can for so long they have expected so little. Like there's nothing that they really have demanded, and so when someone gets on stage and they say something like they're unapologetically pro-life, they all start clapping. Because it's like, oh, no one's ever done that for us before, really. Like, no one's ever brought that to the main stage.
Man, this guy
before.
said he's unapologetically pro-life.
Yeah. Oh!
You said something. There should, I mean,
that's amazing.
We'll know that we succeeded whenever a Republican establishment figure that people like says, I'm unapologetically pro-life, and people boo. Yeah. And you're like, who's booing? Is it all the liberals? And they're like, no, it's not the liberals. It's the Christians.
Yeah.
It's that voting block that they need if they want to win.
Yeah.
Because we're never going to get an end of abortion as long as they can just get us to vote for pro-lifers.
If you really wanted to prove with that question, if you really wanted to prove that you actually hated abortion, you would have answered the question and said, no, abortion is murder and it should not be legal in any state. Like that's how you answer that question. But he just dodges it and then gives this generic, stupid answer that everyone applauds him.
And it works because we haven't been successful yet.
Yeah.
But once we're successful, that's not going to work among many other things. Now we do want to be clear, with folks that are watching the show that are pro-life and call themselves pro-life and, think, man, I just haven't really wrapped my head around this. I kind of like the term pro-life. I've got like a pro-life bumper sticker, a pro-life t-shirt, and I've just never really thought about it in this way. It's like, what are you guys doing? I think we want to be clear that we're not so much harshing on people who think that what they meant by pro-life was sort of criminalizing abortion. We just want to be unapologetically clear. That's not what any of the pro-life politicians, pro-life leaders, movement, lobbyists, journalists, that's not what any of these people mean. They are not abolitionists. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They are using the term pro-life precisely so they can sit on a stage and just say, I'm pro-life when the issue of abortion comes up, because that can literally mean anything.
Yeah.
And if they were being pressed, if like Wallace or whoever's a debate moderator said, okay, we get it. You're a Republican, you're pro-life, you're a Democrat, you're pro-choice. What do you guys think about abolition? Should abortion be abolished? Go. Mm-hmm. The Republican and the Democrat are both going to be like, no, for this reason.
Yeah. Can't we just talk about late term? Like, why do we have to talk about abolishing the whole thing?
Yeah, because they want to keep that political football in play.
Yeah.
And we are like deflating the ball and saying, stop, criminalize abortion. But a lot of normal pro-life people, that's not what they think's going on.
Yeah.
And so this is of such an extreme strategic importance that we stop, giving it to them.
Yeah.
When we don't have a big enough audience yet. We need a bigger audience. But whenever these folks say they're pro-life, you should be like, boo. Whenever they say life issue, you should like throw up in the back of your throat. Because this is a politician basically saying, here I have the opportunity to say that abortion is murder and it should be abolished.
Yeah.
And I'm not. So that's why, there's a very strong reason to do this. And I'm not afraid to say it. Like, it's a dirty word.
Yeah.
When you hear pro-life, like a politician shouldn't be able to put that on a mailer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like that should, when a Christian, a Bible-believing Christian who really wants abortion to be ended or stopped or anything, gets a mailer that says 100% pro-life approved politician, that mailer should cost that politician a vote.
Right. And in Oklahoma especially, and maybe in a few other states where there's an abolition bill, if you get a mailer from someone saying, I am 100% pro-life and I am endorsed by National Right to Life and Oklahoma's for Life, you can say with almost 100% certainty they're fighting to keep abortion legal. Right. And so that's why it needs to be a dirty word. Yeah. Because the people using it, especially in states where abolitionists are gaining a lot of ground, the people who still use the politicians who still go by pro-life are the ones keeping abortion legal. Yeah. Right. Greg McCourtney said he had a mailer. He was running against Carissa Roberson, an abolitionist. He sends out a mailer saying, I am the pro-life candidate in the race. right? I'm endorsed by National Right to Life, Oklahomans for Life, 100% pro-life.
Well, Larry
record.
Boggs did the same thing. He's
Larry
like,
Boggs, all of them.
my opponent is on record saying he would not support this pro-life bill.
Yeah.
Because he wants to abolish abortion completely.
Yeah.
But he don't put that on the mailer.
Yeah.
But they're able to get away with this because of all these people who are just lackadaisically saying, I'm pro-life, and just the person saying pro-life is all that counts.
Yeah.
We need people to move far beyond that. And that's what drawing this line, abolitionist or not abolitionist, does.
And if anything, that election very clearly proved that there is a fine line in the sand. Because as soon as that election was over, as soon as Warren Hamilton gets that primary, Boggs throws his support to the pro-abortion Democrat.
Oh, straight up.
Yeah.
It's sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's like, people are like, well, I think we should say for the people listening, whenever that line was drawn really distinct, the abolitionist won.
Yeah.
Whenever that was the main debate between them, the abolitionist won. So that's a beautiful, good thing that it's shifting. And then anyone who is like in doubt, well, maybe they're sort of making up this difference.
Yeah.
That fact that he turned around and endorsed the pro-abortion Democrat challenger.
Yeah.
I mean, Warren Hamilton's good on all of the conservative issues, and he's good on abortion. And this guy's going to go around and be like, I'm so scared that this guy's going to be up at the Capitol and abolish abortion that we better get a Democrat senator in there.
Right.
That's the true colors. And so the true colors of Larry Boggs and the establishment pro-lifers in them is exposed only by drawing that line.
Yeah.
Right.
And to be clear, the entire establishment's hands are bloody on Boggs too, because it's like they all endorsed Boggs. Every single one of them put their name behind his credibility, behind him as a man, behind him as a Republican politician.
It was crazy. Everyone in Oklahoma
City.
It's
like, the elephants when they line up and they're like tail to trunk.
Yeah.
They just all marched into that area and said, we're for Boggs. And then the people said, we're for Hamilton.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point of all of this is that calling yourself, if you want to, pro-life abolitionist or anything like that, refusing to use abolitionist language blurs that line of demarcation, and it allows people like Larry Boggs, like Greg McCourtney, to get away with what they're doing, to get away with saying...
To get away with murder.
Pro-life, to get away with murder, to get away with the enabling of genocide. Is what it allows them to get away with.
And some people might not want to fess up to this, and there's a million different motives, and you don't really know them. But some people might just be nostalgic about pro-life or whatever.
I think that's probably the main one.
And they just have this, they were raised that way, and they just can't get over it. I've noticed that younger people don't really have a problem. They look at pro-lifers and they're like, these people have been pretending to fight abortion for 4 decades. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Or they just look hokey, or their fonts are bad. And so the abolitionists have better fonts, and that's enough. They have no attachment to the word pro-life.
Yeah.
And you can usually persuade them pretty easily. But there are folks that are just kind of like, well, I want to call myself a pro-life abolitionist. For this kind of innocent reason. You are working against what we're doing.
It blurs the line.
It blurs that line. The other thing is there's also the folk, and I want to talk about them because they're out there, that are doing it for nefarious bad reasons. It's not nostalgia. Mm-hmm. They've invested some kind of time and energy into building up themselves as a pro-lifer. They kind of believe, they're looking at the writing on the wall, and they're like, I think the abolitionists are going to win. They are more biblical, but I want to call myself a pro-life abolitionist. And this is also extremely unhelpful for the same reason, blurring the line.
Yeah.
But it allows people to kind of not confess that what they were doing previously wasn't good.
Right.
And the abolitionist movement really is based, the whole Plexit, the pro-life exit thing is really based on repenting. Earlier episodes on the biblical foundations, like washing yourself, making yourself clean, and then going to correct oppression. Mm-hmm. And so that is an important part of becoming an abolitionist, of saying what we were doing as pro-lifers wasn't right.
Yeah.
And so there's that. One thing, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say an example of exactly what you were talking about. So Oklahoma is a state where abolitionists have gained a ton of ground, and Texas is another one. And so last year, we saw Texas Right to Life use all this abolitionist language. I can't remember the name of the article, but it was something like the 3 steps we need to do to abolish abortion. And they started using very abolitionist language because they were trying to, because like you said,
they're trying to appeal to the change that's happening.
Right. They saw the writing on the wall. They saw people are going to, they're not following Texas Right to Life so much anymore, but people are falling away from Texas Right to Life and starting to follow like Bradley Pierce and J.R. Haas and Wesley Thomas at Abolish Abortion Texas. And they see that and they're like, oh crap, we've got to kind of make people think we're abolitionists too. And so they start using all this abolitionist language in this abolitionist article. Yeah. It was very interesting, but the reason they did that wasn't because they've converted to abolitionism, wasn't because they've rejected incrementalism. It was because they see people moving that direction in Texas. Mm-hmm. They see the influence that Bradley and Wesley and JR have, and they're trying to stop the bleeding of their people who are going to follow Abolish Abortion Texas.
Well, I think a lot of the reason that is, too, is because, and I don't mean this about specific people within the pro-life movement or anything, but for the most part, pro-lifers are not salt and light in their culture. Like, they are not speaking the harsh truth in their culture, and they're chameleons.
Yeah, like let's blend in.
Yeah, they'll see the feminists, all these, like, secular feminists, and they'll go, we're pro-life feminists, we're pro-women, right? And they'll go out and they'll do their whole campaigns
and pro-life atheists and pro-life atheists, LGBTQ, all that stuff.
Yeah, and they'll try to appeal to the culture, and then when they see the culture slipping on something else, slipping in the right direction, they'll start to mask themselves behind that thing. They'll start to change to abolitionist language, but the core of it, their values, are still practicing the same type of cunning. Like, they're still trying to pull a fast one on the feminists. They're still trying to pull a fast one on the atheists, right? They're still trying to pull a fast one on the abolitionists when they adopt the language, just because they're chameleons, not because they're anything that's going to actually do it, right?
Yeah. But the beautiful thing about the word is it puts them in this sort of like situation where they can't pull it off.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember like someone says, well, what if people start using the term abolition, they hijack the term abolition. It doesn't allow it. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. Like I'm an abolitionist and I'm for the regulation of abortion. I mean, it doesn't work. And so whenever an organization like
I'm an abolitionist voting for Mitt Romney, was it?
Yeah. Or like I'm an abolitionist and I will not compromise my vote. You know, and you're just kind of like, okay, so who are you voting for?
Yeah.
Or like what? So it's like the person that says life begins at conception, so we need to ban abortion after 20 weeks. It's like there's something that's happening, but like whenever an organization says, we need to abolish abortion, and then you're like, okay, so the bill that you support is the Abolition of Abortion Act, and they're like, no, it's this born alive conception protection thing. Mm-hmm. I think people will go, so not abolition. So it's one of the important things, like the bill has to be called an abolition bill. Yep. The candidates have to be calling themselves abolitionists because it just keeps people from doing all this silly, you can say it's practicing cunning at best. They're trying to be clever, but at worst, they're just trying to muddy the water so they can get away with murder. Right. Yeah. Or they can get away with murder remaining legal so they can continue to fight it.
So another thing that's important to get to here is one, obviously everything we've talked about, but another is the word is stronger even apart from anything else we've talked about. The word is better, right? The meaning of the word is stronger. Yeah. It signifies certain actions rather than certain opinions. And so Russell, you were. Well,
I think the basic one is like when someone comes up to you and says, "What's your position on abortion?" They're asking you if you're pro-life or you're pro-choice in the previous paradigm. Yeah. Now, if you say I am an abolitionist, they're going to be like, you might have to. I mean, they say like, well, you might have to clarify it. I'm an abolitionist, by which I mean abortion is murder. The laws protecting it should be abolished. Mm-hmm. But they're going to be like, okay, so you're pro-life. And you're like, well, no, I'm not just pro-life. Like, I'm not telling you my moral opinion. It's like pro-life as a term is really just telling you like pro-life or pro-death. It's like accepting the legality of abortion and that abortion can be done down the street from your church or in your bedroom. I am pro-life. Like, here's my moral opinion. Now, if you're an abolitionist, you're not just telling them what your moral opinion is, but you're what you're aiming to do about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is significantly stronger and more clear, and there's less wiggle room.
Yeah.
So I think whenever someone, I believe that the pro-lifers and the pro-choicers will both sort of kind of amalgamate, or they'll kind of combine to oppose the abolitionist,
which is exactly what we've seen.
What we see anytime you have an abolitionist, and they'll kind of go under some form of like the term, and I think that's weird that even for the past 4 decades there's been that term, choose life, which is like adopting the idea of choice, pro-choice, choose life. It's a radically like different than an abolitionist. Abolitionists are like, you should not have the right to choose life. Yeah. If there's a living human being in your womb, you cannot choose life.
Right.
That should be illegal.
Right.
Yeah. 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 I think another thing that we hear a lot is people will say things like, I've been seeing this a lot recently, is people will say things like, I'm not an abolitionist or I'm not pro-life. I'm just a Christian, right? I'm rejecting the distinction that you're making, kind of like the not of Paul, not of Apollos type thing. And you hear this about a whole lot of stuff. Like you hear this about Calvinism, Arminianism, everything. Like people just say, "Oh, I'm not any of that.
Like,
I don't want to
fight."
Yeah.
I'm just going to do this sort of like higher thing.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of times it's well-meaning, but it's like, no, there's a biblical basis for defining your distinctions that you're making.
And when we're going about
like Trinitarian, no one has a problem with that. I am a Trinitarian. That's just saying that you are someone who believes that the God is triune, right?
Yeah. Well, someone comes up and says, "What do you think about the Godhead? Like, what do you think about God? Do you think God is a triune, infinite, 3-person being, or like what is your position? Do you adopt the Trinity or not?"
Let me give you an analogy.
If it's not, it's Let me talk about water, and you're just like, "Oh, Patrick."
Don't do that. Don't give an analogy.
But when someone does that, you should be able to be like, okay, I'm a Trinitarian. Mm-hmm. Right. It's not helpful to be like, I'm a Christian. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not what they're asking.
Yeah.
When it comes to abortion and the question of whether or not it should be abolished, are you an abolitionist or are you not? Mm-hmm. And I think there's this impulse, and I don't want to speak to people's motives, but there's this impulse like, I'm going to avoid the controversy and just call myself a Christian. Now, we do define the Christian position on abortion is abolition.
Yeah.
And we believe that you can back that up from the beginning to the end of the Bible.
Right. We're not saying anything different from what is said in the scriptures. It's almost a doctrinal thing, right? Like you talked about when you read the Oxford English Dictionary definition of abolition, it was like referring to the Christian doctrine of immediatism.
Yeah, these are people who adopt the doctrine of immediatism.
Yeah.
I mean, if you even get on Wikipedia and you look up the abolition of slavery thing, it'll be like James McPherson has found it historiographically helpful to only use the term abolitionist to refer to people who are for the total and immediate abolition of slavery and not just anti-slavery people. Yeah. So the historian thinks, I'm trying to do something very helpful, so you're not confused. I'm not talking about just someone who is anti-slavery. I'm talking someone who is an advocate of abolishing it. And whenever, like this point, like when someone says, I'm just going to say I'm Christian, like, why are they doing that? We're like investing our lives and all of our capital and all of our energy in order to create this defining line and ask people to cross that line for the sake of really and truly ending abortion, because to end it, you have to abolish it. And they're going to be like, well, I know you're trying to do this really helpful thing, but I'm not going to be helpful here. Mm-hmm. Like I'm, for whatever reason, I'm going to keep things fuzzy.
Yeah.
And because like Larry Boggs could just go, listen, I know a lot of people are Facebook messaging me and saying, well, are you an abolitionist? Well, I'm just a Christian. Unhelpful. You can just say I'm a Christian. Guess what? Everybody running for political office in Oklahoma is a Christian. Mm-hmm. And so it is like not helpful. And I don't understand why people want to do that.
Yeah.
The only way for me to even grasp that is that the most charitable thing is they don't understand what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so we need to do a better job of getting them to understand.
Yeah. Hence this episode.
Yes. And it's not just to be harsh on them.
Yeah.
But in a certain sense, if they are doing it on purpose, they're like they're serving the bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're in bed with the enemy there when they're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strong term. It's a clear term. There's no wiggle room about it. I mean, there's a reason it's used in the Declaration of Independence, right? Mm-hmm. There's a reason. You were talking about the verse in 2 Timothy.
There's implied action,
right? Implied action. There's all these things. It really is a better word. It really is an extremely important line to draw so that people understand the differences.
And you don't have to use it
in every way.
You don't have to use it all the time. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, sometimes, like I myself, if I'm writing some kind of status. And I'm like, wow, I'm about to drop the A-bomb for the 12th time, I'll use a synonym. People know that I'm advocating for abolition. So I'll use a synonym in that context, like to stop abortion.
Yeah.
Or to end abortion.
Right.
Another synonym for like immediately would be now. Like no compromise, immediately now. So you can use synonyms, but the problem is whenever you use the synonyms and then you go like end or stop or something like that, destroy, and you kind of go out of your way not to use the A word, you are really doing something disastrous. And I'll give you an example of it. And we love these guys. So, I'm going to give an example and they're going to be like, man, that guy's being me. But whenever the Baptists got together and in Oklahoma Baptist, they get together and they write a resolution and they want to get the Southern Baptist Convention, state of Oklahoma, to say, we are for ending abortion immediately. Mm-hmm. We're only going to back legislation that ends abortion. And they write that language and they get it passed. And they're all meaning sort of abolition. But they purposely chose the E word over the A word because they thought that it would sell a little better or whatever. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have that sort of like we're connecting to abolitionist who made us all feel bad about the fact that we've been apathetic about abortion. Like we feel bad about that still, so we're mad at them and let's use the E word that's a little more PC. Yeah. But after they passed it, the I can't remember, it was the Tulsa World or the Daily Oklahoman or whoever asked Greg Treat, hey, did you see that the Baptist passed? And Greg Treat, of course, is just like, oh, of course. I mean, Southern Baptists have always wanted to end abortion. I want to end abortion. But this is a guy who is an anti-abolitionist and comes out of his way to say, I am not for, Senate Bill 13.
Right. Because when you use end, it provides that wiggle room, and Greg Treat is able to say, well, that's good. Let's end
I'm
abortion.
For the end of abortion. We'll regulate it and regulate it and regulate it, and eventually it'll come to an end.
Yeah, it doesn't draw the stark line, which allows Greg Treat to succeed in the kind of where the lines have been blurred there.
Yeah, and he can and anyone, pro-lifer, abolitionist, can stand up and say like, I want abortion to come to an end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it can be used as a synonym, but it's not the word.
Yeah.
So when people are like, well, I like to use it because I don't want to offend anybody or something. I was like, well, whenever I watch a movie and the movie comes to an end, the movie is not abolished. Mm-hmm. I could rewatch the movie right there and end. Yeah. Now it ended, but I could, you read a book to the end, or you read the book and you're like, this book's stupid. And you stop reading the book. But you don't abolish the book. I guess you could be reading the book and be like, this book's stupid, and you could burn it and burn every copy of it or criminalize the reading of it or whatever. That would be abolishing the book. Yeah. But you don't. So end and stop, they can be synonyms. Right. But when you're writing a bill, when you're creating a movement, when you're running as a politician,
writing a resolution,
the person that you're running against can stand up and be like, I'm for the end of abortion too.
Yeah.
By end, I believe we should go about it in a certain way.
Yeah.
Abolition is the way. And you're saying, I am for the abolition of it.
Right. And all that, not obviously the people who wrote that resolution are now people who are totally with us.
Yeah,
so
they
not
are.
Say anything bad.
Yeah, they are abolitionists.
Yeah, right.
And,
they are, yeah.
And I think that.
And we love those guys. And we had one of them on the podcast recently.
Yeah.
So,
and
not to throw any shade.
And even, no shade. Yeah. And also, just because it's sort of possibly an elephant in the room for people who are watching, like, we love that organization, End Abortion Now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I mean, I appreciate the work that End Abortion Now does to get churches to abortion clinics, for instance.
It was Jeff Durbin that opened the door to abolitionism for me.
Yeah.
Legit did.
Yeah. And for lots of people. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think, and what's funny is I think a lot of people, when they see the phrase End Abortion Now, they're seeing it through lenses that have been created by that distinguishing abolitionist question that we've put out there in the culture.
Yeah.
Like they're thinking abolitionists are different from pro-lifers. I am an abolitionist. End abortion now. That's what they mean. And that's what the end abortion now guys mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that some of the central folks, Jeff Durbin, I know John Speed, is an abolitionist and doesn't have any concern with like using the term and stuff like that. They have the URL end abortion now. And when they use the word end, they mean abolition.
Yeah.
But it is in a legal term. Like you would never write a bill to end abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to use the word abolish. So think about like whenever Thomas Jefferson, Mr. Wordsmith, is writing the Declaration of Independence, and he says, whenever any form of government, goes against these principles, it's, the right of the people to alter or abolish it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have made sense if he said it's the right of the people to alter or end it. You would be like, end it? Well, how to end it? Well, to abolish it, to annul it. When you're choosing the word in a certain context, right, you have to use the A word to achieve the full meaning of what you're doing. But we aren't saying that End Abortion Now should rebrand themselves as
right,
Abolish Abortion Now.
Right. There's a difference.
Well, that's a good idea.
There is a difference between kind of what you're using colloquially or to use as the name of an organization, and what's used on a legal document. And so it's a different thing. And so we love End Abortion Now.
Yeah.
We collaborate with them, and we love doing so because they're an awesome organization.
Yeah.
Apologies is an awesome church, but it's just in the more formal senses, in your resolutions, in your legislation, abolish is the word.
Yeah, and we love them and anyone else enough to where if they were running around saying we are pro-life abolitionists, we'd say, well, you're being unhelpful jerks. I mean, we would say, this is not helpful.
Yeah.
This is as helpful as, when people are always like, well, do you really need to be this much of a stickler on this? And you're like, well, when you're trying to shift a paradigm, you have to shift the language. Mm-hmm. And without getting all nerdy and Kuhnian on this, and that's my background as a historian, philosopher of science, this was super important. And if you allow me to be nerdy for an analogy, back when they shifted from a Earth-centered cosmology to a sun-centered cosmology, everyone was a geocentrist, Earth-centered, and they shifted to heliocentrism, sun-centered.
I thought it was sunocentrism.
Sunocentric. Yeah. No, there was much more Latin back in the day. And so it was like heliocentrism. Now, that was important that they weren't just shifting the language. They were shifting really like the whole organization of the, Milky Way galaxy. And so, whenever that shift was happening, people would literally ask them, are you a geocentrist or are you a heliocentrist? And some people who had trained as geocentrist, didn't want, and they looked at the arguments for heliocentrism. They said, you know what? I want to be sort of a geo-heliocentrist. So they would create this sort of pro-life abolitionist position so they could sort of be both.
Right. They see the writing on the wall. They see everything going that direction. They can sense that there's something wrong about where they were before, but they don't want to fully embrace it. There's something wrong with where they were before, and so they hold on to some of the language.
Yeah, and they end up doing something ridiculous, like having the Earth in the center, with the sun going around the Earth and all the planets going around the sun.
Yeah,
and it still works for predicting planetary motions, but it's just ridiculous. But it's like they're trying to save face.
Yeah.
And as soon as they die, everyone's a heliocentrist. Mm-hmm. This is what Kuhnian, historians of science have found. Yeah. And so there may be people who want to be pro-life abolitionists today, but there's no point. Now, abolition is such a strong term that what we're going to deal with is people sort of tacking words onto abolition to modify it.
Yeah.
Like, I am a gradual abolitionist.
Yeah. Abolitionist with exceptions. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just like, abolitionist with exceptions. So you're not an abolitionist.
Absurd. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there are, and we'll have to go against these things. But these groups that use synonymous language, I mean, some people, it's like you'll be listening to them and they're like ranting or they're preaching or something, and you can see they're about to say the A word, and it's like they trip up on it and they say the E word. Or every time they say the A word, they follow it up with using the E word. And they're probably just trying to make sure that they're clear to everybody.
Yeah.
And so we're not, in this podcast, we're not saying all these people are, bad. But we're saying the reason we're doing this is for a very specific, strong, strategic, and ideologically consistent reason. And if we can draw this line, we can get people to cross this line, and it's going to make our work that much easier and effective. And we're bold about it. We want you to do it. We want everybody watching this show, if you believe what we believe, to be abolitionist. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So,
just to recap everything, it's very important that we shift this paradigm, that people begin using the language of abolition, that we stop using pro-life, because it's a term that is just becoming synonymous with compromised and weak and unchristian way of thinking, especially about the issue of abortion. So help us do that. That's what we're trying to do. And a big part of that is just on the individual level. You as an individual, talking to your friends, talking to people, identifying yourself as an abolitionist and not as a pro-lifer, and then helping organizations like us get the word out, because we're doing this podcast, we're doing a lot of articles and publications, and we're lobbying on the state level. So a big way that you guys can help is to fund us, to help us do what we're doing.
And the message, it does resonate. Like most of the time you set up pro-life as this moral opinion, abolition is an action word that tells you what you're aimed to do. A lot of people will be like, oh yeah, I'm an abolitionist. Mm-hmm. I never even thought about it. Like if I had $1 for every time someone said, I've never even thought about it, we wouldn't have a funding issue. Mm-hmm. But we do have a funding issue. I mean, the thing is it is how many people can we reach with this information? If we reach them all, we will have the numbers and the people and the ability to actually to shift the paradigm to the point where politicians have to either raise their hands for abolition or not. Mm-hmm. So that's why we ask people to fund us, because we want to get the message out there.
Yep. So you can go to freethestates.org, hit the donate button up in the top right corner if you are able to do so. And we'll see you guys next week.
Yep.
Thank you.